Amidst the boundless expanses of space, the ships of the Cobalt Sentinels, a proud successor chapter of the illustrious Ultramarines, voyage with purpose. When a signal from a distant planet, long forgotten to be under the control of the Imperium, is received, the master of the fleet, forever vigilant and resolute, dispatches a contingent of ships to investigate the enigmatic signal. But time, distorted by the whims of the warp, has masked the true turmoil of this planet. Instead of a mere rebellion, they encounter a celestial dance of Eldari ships encircling the planet. Swift decisions need to be made as the Cobalt Sentinels brace for confrontation. Our scouts have been eliminated on approach to the facility, but their sacrifice yields valuable intelligence. We were able to obtain believed numbers of the enemy, sending information now. We are approaching from the south of the facility, and our Inferno squads are clearing the route for my Terminators. We are preparing positions. Captain Gaius Solaron is available through teleportation if needed. We will succeed, brothers. Starting off the battle, all forces deploy with Captain Solaron in reserves. The Aeldari have decided to split the Wind Riders into two smaller units. Calling on the Fates to assist in this battle, the Aeldari managed to obtain martial priority, making the first set of moves. Both units of Wind Riders speed up the board to take early control of the No Man's Land's objectives. Using the kick-up of dust from the speeding bikers, the Farseer instructs his accompanying unit of Guardians up the field in support, knowing that the hulking tower of the supporting Wraithlord will be able to support the second unit of Riders. As the unit of Riders ahead of the Farseer skim around the corner expecting to see a unit of Marines to open fire into, they are met by the unexpected impact of flaming Promethium. The Inferno squad of the Cobalt Sentinels had managed to secure the main route the Riders would take, and were able to deliver their deadly payload of fuel onto the Riders. The remaining two Riders empty all the available firepower their bikes can yield into the unit of 5 armour-clad humanoids. Due to the heavy armour worn by most Marines, the units were able to absorb the majority of the fire, while only suffering one minor wound inflicted to a member of the squad. As this is happening, the second unit of Riders have a different experience as they round the corner to see a wall of mass ceramite in the form of an advancing unit of Terminators. With the most subtle nods noticed by the rest of the team, the signal to open fire was given, and the unit unleashes the power of the scatter lasers and shuriken catapults, with the result of minor wounds inflicted to the Terminators, which were still nevertheless progressing towards them. Seeing this lack of effect from the Wind Riders, Farseer Fainalor gave the signal to fire the heavier weapons from both the Wraithlord as well as his own heavy weapons platform in support of the Riders. Both weapons rang out as they discharged the energy of the weapons. However, they were unable to cause any additional damage to the units of Space Marines and Terminators, and the Space Marines were just getting started. For Librarian Heratos, the first sight of the Eldari happened quickly as 3 bikes sped around the corner, most of the shots missing or just deflecting off of their reinforced tactical dreadnought armour of him and his unit. One lucky shot did make its way into the crevice of one of the team's suits, not harming the Marine, but affecting the suit's mobility. And then an order was given to move up and shorten the range between them and the enemy. Sergeant Quittis Maxim received the order to press forward and moved his teams forward from the cover of small ruins, knowing that the shorter range would increase the chance of mass damage for the enemy. As the unit got into place and the bikers of the enemy came ever closer, the unit loosed their full complement of Promethium, which at this range the speeding bikers could not avoid. This time, the bikers and bikes soon began to melt into piles of slag, with only the odd gem glinting in the waste. Whereas for the Terminators of the First Company sent in support of Librarian Heratos, the procedure here was simple. They are a mobile weapons platform with a high level of durability and accuracy against a foe with small arms fire. The Terminator unit, being armed with storm bolters and an assault cannon, lay down a consistent high rate of accurate fire as they moved towards the foe. This relentless barrage of bullets tore through the unit of 3 bikers, leaving both midfield objectives open for the taking. Farseer Fainalor took a deep breath, calling on the energies available to Farseers such as themselves, and felt that power release, bolstering the squad of Guardians around them. There was only one way to keep back the Marines now. With a signal, the order is given to the Wraith Lord to move forward and engage the unit of Terminators, while the unit of Guardians remain in place in order to eliminate the Infernus Marines. As far off into the distance, the immense figure of the Wraith Lord lunges into movement with an alarming swiftness. The Guardians fire into the Infernus Marines. In a moment, the air between the Guardians and the Marines fills with glittering lights as the shuriken catapults release their harsh payload, interspersed with the rhythmic humming and pulsing of the star cannon. After the dust settles, there remains one lone sergeant. Feanor saw the moment the last man besides the sergeant fell. Calling off the attack, they manifest their powers and decide that a sign is needed to avenge their recent lost riders. Releasing the power and their anger, the Farseer unleashes a searing bolt of eldritch power, striking into the lone sergeant. As the energies hit the Marines' armor, they pass within, creeping through the holes made by the barrage of shuriken catapult rounds. In a moment, the Farseer's power converts the sergeant's physical matter into energy, as the ceramite suit itself blows apart in a flash of light. On the other side of the facility, the Wraith Lord, while moving forward to block the incoming Terminators, releases a volley of arms, firing both catapults and lances with little effect on the Terminators, whose heavier armor is able to defend against the incoming fire, allowing for a strong retaliation and counteroffensive. Having now lost the Infernus squad and feeling the resonance effects of the Aeldari Farseer's witchcraft, Horatos knew that the only option for success was to use himself and his squad of veterans to draw the fire of the enemy, allowing for the main objective to be taken. With that thought, Horatos sent a signal to the carrier in orbit as his unit moved forward towards the Wraith construct. Moments later, as the unit approached the destination, there was a telltale flash, like lightning from the sky, announcing the arrival of Gaius Solaron, captain of the 7th Company. Gaius wasted no time in helping his battle brothers. Knowing his Stormbolter would do minimal damage, if any, he fired the rounds off into the back of the Wraith construct, which staggered for the slightest of moments while it identified this new threat. This signaled the opportunity for the Terminators to attack. The whole unit of veterans fired their full complement of weapons, taking extra care with each shot while vowing to honor the chapter by defeating this giant machine. However, despite this two-sided attack, and Horatos unleashing a powerful bolt of psychic energy, they were unable to harm the large machine, which turned its attentions back to the unit of veterans. With the sudden arrival of another Terminator armor-clad figure appearing in the backline, and knowing that the Wraith Lord will choose to pursue the unit as a greater threat, Feanor decided the best option to win this battle would be to clear the current area of threats, allowing for a dash to the Space Marine backline where the Terminators can be eliminated in a crossfire. Timing was important. Feanor could hear the distant noise of the arm-mounted shuriken catapults on the Wraith Lord. If it followed the normal pattern, the Bright Lance would fire last, and that would be the moment to strike. As expected, as the Bright Lance discharged its shot, the lone Space Marine came slightly out of cover, and that was the moment. Feanor released a bolt of energy in between the shots from the star cannon that had also managed to gain a lock on the lone figure, which moments later disappeared in an explosion of dust and debris, shielding the figure from sight. Having closed the gap on the unit of Terminators without dealing any significant damage, the Wraith Lord sprinted towards the unit, sliding into striking distance and righting itself in a fluid motion. Except when it arose in its grip, there was a long saber, which like a flash flew out at the Terminators, sweeping across the whole unit in order to push them back and gain more fighting room. The blows struck down across the Terminators in the unit. These blows would normally be strong enough to rip through a full unit of Marines, but not Terminators. They are made of hardier stuff, and their armor is emblazoned with a portion of the armor worn by the Emperor of Mankind himself, and he seems to smile down on the unit as they fight. Horatos felt the energy of the Crux Terminatus protecting the unit he was with, and silently thanked the Emperor, before raising his force weapon, and heard the sharp cracking of wraithbone, as the veterans armed with power fists and power weapons started to tear through the construct, causing a vast amount of damage in comparison to the past shooting rounds. Knowing that Heratos and the unit of 5 Terminators were now in combat with the Wraith construct, Captain Gaius turned his attention to the primary objective, which had been left open by the Aeldari forces. Moving forward, he enters the remains of a building and spots the central control panel, which is one of the main objectives. The adapted skills and heightened intelligence of the Space Marines allowed Gaius to utilise the panel in his Terminator armour while still firing, this time turning his attention to the Guardians that managed to cause him so much damage. Depressing the trigger on the Stormbolter, it rattles off a bunch of shells, heralding a storm of retribution. While this was happening, the combat between the Wraithlord and Terminators continued. This time the Wraithlord struck out with a more direct and powerful blow, with the power of this attack being focused on a select few men. Librarian Heratos saw the lifeless weight of his lost battle brother fall to the floor. Seeing the Wraith was preparing for another strike, Heratos knew to encourage his men to give one more push. The unit managed to punch their way through the remaining sections of Wraithlord before it fell to the floor in a moaning, ethereal whine. Farseer Fainalor felt more than heard the loss of the Wraithlord on the other side of the power facility, and they knew that they were the last defense forces in the area. They don't need to survive. They just need to take victory away from the Imperium. With that in mind, Fainalor spread out his last few remaining troops in order to allow one final push in the future, while making sure the unit could bring maximum amount of power to bear on both the Terminators and the Captain. After taking suitable positions, the unit began firing, with the Farseer firing another blast of Eldritch power at the Captain, which this time hit Gaius Solaron square on, and in a snap and a minor explosion of lightning, the Captain's empty armour slowly slumped to the ground. While this was happening, the remaining Guardians released a volley of shurikens into the Terminators from the flank, managing to cause a minor wound to a member of the unit. Heratos felt the psychic resonance of the Farseer's attack once more, but this time, in the aftermath of the struggle with the Wraith construct, Heratos saw the impact that felled Gaius, captain of the 7th Company, and Heratos vowed to destroy the unit that killed his captain, his brother, his friend. Putting the grief aside, as all Astartes are trained to, Heratos acted quickly, taking overall command of the battle and pulling the Terminators back in order to have maximum engagement with the Guardians, at which point the Terminators opened fire against the Aeldari. Over the sound of Stormbolter fire could be heard the explosions of the bolter rounds impacting the targets, before the whine and hiss of the unit's assault cannon rang out, sending a hail of shells down the field. The armour of the Aeldari is resilient, but against the high volume of precise bolter fire, the armour can only prolong the suffering. Slowly, as the bullets rip through every member of the Guardian unit, leaving the Farseer alone and wounded from a lucky ricochet from the dying weapons platform. Fainalor's vision faded and returned. They felt the sting of the bolter shrapnel digging into their upper arm. But it is most likely the foe have failed in their overall objectives, so Fainalor must hold out as long as they can. And with that thought, the Farseer moved so that all of their weaponry could be utilised. First, raising their arm to fire the shining spear, but due to the recent wound, the shot hit off-centre, doing little to no damage. The last option is to channel as much energy as possible into a psychic storm. But Fainalor is drained, and while they continually strike out blow after blow, the Terminators move inexorably closer. Heratos felt no small amount of pity for the small alien creature as his unit moved forward, this being having been nearly drained of all of their energy. At that moment, as to almost contradict the librarian's thoughts, a stronger bolt of energy struck the unit and caused the two battle brothers next to him to explode, covering Heratos in blood for the first time in the battle. Unfortunately, on this occasion, it was his comrades. Filled with sudden further anger and knowing that it is his responsibility as a member of the Librarius to finally deal with this creature, Heratos fired his Stormbolter at the Farseer, which hit the body and caused a momentary lapse in psychic energy, which is all Heratos needed. Moments later, the Librarian of the Cobalt Sentinels released a bolt of energy with such fury that the manifestation of warp energy lifted the Farseer bodily from the ground, depositing its lifeless husk partially fused to the wall of a nearby facility by the potency of psychic energy. Heratos took a moment to regather his thoughts, which is when he heard the telltale sound of Aeldari jet bikes approaching. This time, hundreds. Heratos knew that on this occasion, the Cobalt Sentinels had failed in their mission. A signal was sent to arrange an exfiltration, and Heratos and his 3 remaining companions needed to hold out for rescue, if it could come at all.